Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Blue is the New White podcast. We have an awesome guest for you today. Really enjoyed this conversation, and I think you will too. Another fellow podcaster in the skilled trade space, Mr. Dan Dowdy from Built for the Trades. If you haven't listened to his podcast or you haven't seen his stuff, definitely follow him. Definitely find the show. It's a good one. He's a down-to-earth guy who shares with us today his journey through the trades from master plumber to business owner and eventually to coaching. We talk about everything from business ownership to leadership to attracting and retaining the next generation of technicians and what's important in a company culture. He's had a really incredible journey and has a ton of great insight, was more than willing to share his failures in order to enable the success of you, the listener. So very valuable episode. Be sure to listen in to this candid conversation with Dan to become better at your craft and to check the box that says that you actually learned something today. As always, don't forget to subscribe to this channel and on our website at blueisthenewwhite.com to receive all the latest updates. As always, this show's not monetized and we don't run ads. We rely strictly on the word of mouth from our listeners to further this mission. So if you enjoy this episode, please do me a favor, do yourself a favor, do the future generations of tradespeople a favor, and the future of civilization itself a favor, and rate it, review it, and share it. No pressure, but do it. Thank you again, and enjoy this episode of the Blue is the New White podcast with Dan Dowdy of Built for the Trades. Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Blue is the New White podcast. Today, I've got a special guest, another fellow podcaster. You might know him from Built for the Trades, Mr. Dan Dowdy. Dan, welcome to the show, man.
Josh, thank you for having me on the show. I'm really looking forward to our conversation today.
Yeah, man, me too. I did get an opportunity to listen to a couple of episodes, and I really like how you lay it out, how you have the episode, and then you kind of do individual episodes with your takeaways.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's really cool. And I think if anybody out there, let's just start off. If anybody out there isn't listening or following to the Built for the Trades podcast, you got to add it to your list right now. We'll wait.
All right. Awesome. Yeah. Well, yeah. Thank you for that plug, Josh. And I really appreciate that. And yeah, really Built for the Trades is built to bring together a trades community that shares similar values like integrity, hard work ethic, doing what you say you're going to do, and really serving the customer, serving the people around you, serving your team first and foremost. And, the trades that I grew up in was very much focused on that. I love your title as well. Blue is the New White. I really feel like a lot of people are wanting to either be in our industry or sell to our industry because blue collar people are so awesome. And the reason why we're so awesome is because we have integrity. We have a good work ethic. We don't make excuses. We take ownership and really apply that to what we do day to day. So if that resonates with anybody in your audience, then definitely follow and come be a part of the Built for Trades community. We say we are built for the trades, and that's what it stands for.
Yeah, no, and that's awesome. I couldn't agree more. And blue collar work, man. These guys, the people in the industry are really, what make the industry what it is. Real salt of the earth folks, and down to earth, and just like you said, they've got integrity, they got work ethic, old school mentality, man. I these are my people. That's it. So let's start off with you, man. What for those who don't know who you are and who haven't heard your show and seen your stuff online, why don't you kind of just give us a rundown on who is Dan Dowdy, where'd you come from, and how did you get to where you're sitting today in front of me virtually?
All right. So yeah, I'll go all the way back, Josh. I was born and raised here in Texas, and I'm a second generation master plumber. So born and raised in the trades for the most part. I remember going all the way back to being probably 5 or 6 years old, summertime, going to job sites with my dad, roughing in new construction builds on, in some community on the lake out in the Austin area. And my dad would tell me, hey, if you're good and you help me today, I'll pay you $5, right? But majority of the time, I found myself down jumping off people's docks into the lakes and into the lake and having fun. But the cool thing is, when I did work and I didn't earn the money, it was back in those days where we could actually go to an arcade and nobody could get a hold of us. So after work, we go play some arcades and have a good time. But yeah, so growing up with a wrench in my hand, I really love the trades from the start. And but growing up, I didn't really know. I guess going through school, even when I was going through school in the 90s, right? Like even at that point, everybody was pointing people towards college. And you need to go to college. If you're a plumber or you're a tradesman, that doesn't lead to success. The school counselors were preaching that. And so, though I grew up learning the trade and working the summers and working with my friends and learning that work ethic, I still went to college for a few years when I graduated. And I quickly figured out that wasn't what I was meant to do. I was not enjoying that. I wanted to get back. I wanted to get back in the business and start working there full time. What'd you
go to college for?
So yeah, I went to college for 2 years and I was going for business management.
Okay.
And so I was going with the intention to come back and work in the family business.
Sure.
But I just got the itch. I ended up coming back and marrying my high school sweetheart, bought a house, and just started living my life, So
it's about
I'm sure
as blue collar as it gets, my friend.
About as blue collar as it gets. Yeah. So yeah, I've been happily married 18 years and have 4 kids now. And, but, so going back to my story, really getting into the trades. And when I came back from college and started full time, I started at the entry level of being an apprentice and then running a truck. And then eventually around 2010, my dad was like, look, like I can't manage it. I don't want to manage this anymore. I need you to come out of a truck and start running this company. And we were a small family operation, probably had about 10 to 15 employees at that time. And, what I quickly realized was that, people can only teach you really as much as they know. And even with my parents running a business for, since 1980, so at that point, it was almost 30 years, the best they could tell you is, hey, I want you to manage this business and I want you to be a good leader. And here you go. There really wasn't a whole lot to it besides that. Show up every day, work hard, communicate with your team. My dad used to walk me around and say things like, you just got to kind of like feel the energy in the room and really get a good idea how your company's doing, which a lot of that still stands true today. But going through that experience, and somebody else may be resonating with this, but going through that experience, 12 years after that, 12 years later, I realized, wow, there's so much that we could be teaching the next generation of leaders coming up that I wasn't necessarily taught. I had to learn, right? And in learning those things, it really can, really make the journey hard. Just like growing a business, right? If you don't have a coach or somebody to help you on the way, you really learn by mistake and experience.
Oh, absolutely. I want to interject real quick because, this is a question I get asked a lot. And honestly, we don't talk a lot about it on the show. And I think it's a good opportunity. But leadership, right, in the blue-collar space, especially in the blue-collar space, I think it means something a little bit different than it does in the white-collar space. Or maybe it's the way that it's interpreted or whatever. But listen, back to our conversation earlier, the people in these industries are unbelievable people with great work ethic, and integrity and all of this. With that comes a lot of pride as well, and a lot of times with pride comes ego, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, right? Look at the Bulls in the 90s, man. That whole team was ego, but they won how many championships? So it can be a good thing, but it can also be hard to lead, right? So, I guess I'm curious from you, what does good leadership look like, and how does somebody develop the type of skills they need to lead in these industries?
That's a great question. So, it goes back to knowing what leadership is and what management is and really understanding the difference between the two, because in order to be a really good leader, it's not necessarily about a position, right? Leadership is more of influence. And so being a good leader is leading a good example of, so I could be a technician in the field. I'm a leader, right? I'm leading either a good example or a bad example. or I could be a customer service rep in the office. I'm a leader there as well. So the first thing is understanding that leadership is not just a position, though we do, our brains go to that when you hear leadership, right? But leadership is influence. The management piece is really where you start to manage people, and that's the accountability, the ability to hold people accountable. And so knowing the difference, I know people listening can probably start to think, what am I more naturally gifted at? And no matter what the personality, what I've found, Josh, is that people are either more naturally gifted at leadership, building relationships, and being very influential with people, or they're more naturally gifted at managing people, which is being willing to have the tough conversations. And a lot of times, if you're good at leadership or good at management, you're not usually good at both. And so when it comes to growing, I encourage people to start reading books or listening to podcasts and learning from other people, because leadership is a daily journey, really, with no destination. And so the best way I figured out, unfortunately, later in life, how to learn was, hey, man, I need to start reading some books and learning from people who have been there and done that. Because once you start doing that, you'll realize that everybody's sharing a very common message, very similar message. It's just done in different styles, and so that's really what I look at when I look at leading people in the trades. It's understanding what you're better at, being able to do both well, and then from there, just waking up daily to keep growing.
That's really, really good insight, and some tangible insight too. I think that my audience is really going to appreciate that. I really especially like the part where you said leadership is a daily journey with no destination. I think that'll resonate a lot. I mean, that resonates with me, right? Because it's, in the position that I'm in the business, leadership is obviously very important. And I mean, you're learning every day, right? And every day you're like, am I doing this right? Is this a, and it really is a journey, because you have to constantly adjust, and there is no end point. You just hope to keep improving and keep getting better and keep, influencing people in the way that they need to be influenced. And, a big part to me is that what I've learned over the years, especially transitioning, right? Because a lot of times you before you find out what you're naturally gifted at, you have to go down those paths. You have to do the management to realize that you suck at it, or the leadership to realize that you're great at it, or whatever it may be. Yeah. And, one of the things that that I had learned is that leadership is, you can't convince people to do something and be excited about doing it at all. I mean, how do I put this? They have to convince themselves, right? So a key to leadership, I would say, for the people listening, is asking the right questions, right? Whereas opposed to management, where you're telling somebody what to do, it's very task-oriented and accountability-based, right? Do this, this, and this. If you don't do this, this, and this, you're essentially not doing your job. Whereas, leadership, to influence somebody to say, hey, what do you think is the best way to do something like this? To really get them to understand why it is that they're doing it, and the impact that they're making on the organization or the people around them, or whatever it may be. So no real point there. Just wanted to interject. I like talking about business and leadership and stuff like that. So I appreciate the insight there, and I think my listeners are really going to enjoy that.
Yeah, and Josh, I wanted to continue, because you just opened up a whole nother can of worms in my head. I'm thinking like, wow, okay, we could go down this for a while, but you are spot on. Like, when you're leading followers, they're depending on you to tell them what to do. When you're leading leaders, you're asking questions, getting them to think for themselves, because if you can get them to verbalize what it is they should be doing, now they own it, right? Yeah. And so there's a big difference between you telling them what to do and then you asking them questions to get them to actually think what the next step is. Because once they answer that, the cool thing is they usually don't come back to you again for the same question.
That's right. That's right. And that's a science, man. or an art, or whatever you want to call it, but it definitely takes practice.
It's easier said than done.
That's right.
For sure. So I wanted to just kind of share a little more about my story. Yeah. And because you had mentioned, like, in leadership, ego can come into play, and ego is not necessarily a bad thing. I agree, especially when it walks the line of confidence. And, but in my journey, so in 2010, when I took over managing the business, I went to my first conference and realized that, look, there's actually coaches out there that can be coaching me and teaching me how to do these things. And so that's when I hired my first coach, and our business began to grow $1 million growth years, year after year, because I was hungry, right? I was young. I was a leader. I was reading books. I was being coached. I was applying all these different things. But about 5 years in, I found myself from the outside looking in, very successful, from the inside, very empty. And my marriage was on the rocks. I was a very selfish leader. If you listen back to some of my old podcasts back in those days, a lot of, when people said, hey, Dan, great company, you're very successful, I rarely ever, if ever, gave my team the credit. And I just want to share that because it was the lowest part of my life. And I think that with social media and the opportunity to make money in the trades and lead and build your own businesses and manage and things like that, we could all easily fall into that trap of it is all about me. I am the reason why this is successful. So, but it wasn't until my wife gave me an ultimatum of like, look, like either you're going to choose your family or you're going to keep going on this path of working too long, drinking too much, going to too many work conferences, all those different things that I was doing, that I realized like, wow, I have to get my act together, and I just started surrounding myself with the right people. And I started really focusing outwardly on serving. And I started with serving my family first, thinking about other people besides myself. And that really started to help me serve my team. And what happened was we went from a successful, money-driven, very profitable, it's all about me, it's all about the sales and the technicians type of company, to more of a team atmosphere, because I was leading from the top saying, look, there's no position in this company that I won't do if that's what it takes to serve my team, from even walking and taking the trash out, or helping wash the vans. And when I found that, I really feel like I truly found success, because my marriage got better, my business culture and the teamwork got better, my relationship with my kids got better. And so I just want to encourage people out there that if they're going through that, or if they haven't gone through it yet, it's a slippery slope, especially today when, you can hop on social media and become a big time influencer. Yeah. It can quickly become all about you, but it's definitely not the best way to lead when you're leading people.
Oh, 100%, and you're absolutely right. It's an easy trap to fall into, and I'd be lying if I said I didn't slip down that path once or twice too. And, I've got a really great support system here, but blessed, to have that. And, people willing to look me in the face and call me out on it. Right. And that's the other thing is when you are in a position like that in a company, and I think this might resonate with some listeners out there too, when you're a business owner or a CEO or upper level management or executive staff, you don't get a lot of people coming to you, holding you accountable. You're expected to hold yourself accountable, right? People don't want to look at their boss and say, hey, you fucked up. That's just the way that it is. And so, when you never hear that kind of stuff, or you hear it very seldom, it starts to, your ego kicks in, right? And says, well, geez, if nobody says that you're doing a bad job, you must be doing a really, 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 really great job. And so, so it's a slippery slope. It's easy to go down that path. And, you got to just keep checking yourself and keep bringing yourself down to earth. Let me ask you this. When you were in that transition and you were in that phase where you called yourself a selfish leader, right? And you noticed that about yourself. What are the biggest differences that you noticed from your staff when you were leading one way compared to when you were serving and leading another way?
That's a great question, Josh. The biggest thing that I noticed from my staff was probably a deeper relationship, and they felt more appreciated. And that goes, I go really deep with that, but really it's, when you're selfish, it's all about you, and people are really more of an inconvenience to you. I think when you're serving, it's more about the people around you, realizing that if you could help make them better, they're going to help make you better. And so you're giving them more time that's uninterrupted, and you're showing them that they are important, and you're listening to them and learning about their family and helping them set goals and helping them achieve their goals. So that's probably the biggest thing I've noticed is even to this day, you know, I guess I'm looking back 7 years ago, even to this day, it's, you know, I still have really great relationships with people who used to work with me in my company. And we still have mentorship type relationships. And that doesn't happen just because you're a boss.
No.
You know, that happens because you've truly built it. You truly care about your people, no matter what. And that's also something I've had to learn along my journey. I mean, when people, you know, especially in the trades, jobs are so, I mean, they're there for everybody who has a license in their pocket ready to work, right? Mm-hmm. So a lot of business owners and managers think, you know, I got burned by this last person that worked for me, so I don't really think I'm going to invest in this person like I did the last person, right? You're shaking your head because we've all felt that way. We feel jaded by it a little bit. So the biggest thing I've realized is that people are only in your life for a season. And that season, you need to maximize to the best of your ability to help that person get to whatever their next season is going to be. So the season could be 6 months, a year, 6 years, 20 years, 30 years. We don't know, but we got to choose to see this as an opportunity to help them get better. Because I've had the pleasure now that I'm in coaching and training and what I do full time here, podcasting and stuff, that I had a guy leave my home service business. I guess it's been about 6.5 or about 6 years ago. And he left to start his own business. And anytime somebody left our family business, it was automatically like, well, screw that person. Like, I can't believe they're leaving to go anywhere else. Right. That was the mentality we had. Yeah. I mean, and I'm just being completely honest with you. Yeah. And then, man, God forbid somebody goes and starts their own business. Now they're going to compete with me. Mm-hmm. Like, I've given them all these years. You've been with me 12 years. Now you're going to leave and go start your own business. I've had to learn that doesn't make you a better person. I've learned that, you know what, they're in my life for a season. I'm going to help you get to where you want to go, because I've had the pleasure of now coaching this person full time. So it's gone full circle to where they worked for me. Now I'm working for them. And so I like living my life like that, knowing that I did the best I could, and I treated this person right, to where 6 years later, now they're coming back to me to get more information and to help grow their own business now that I'm doing this full time.
Yeah. Now that's amazing. And I laugh because it's so spot on, and it's so common in these family style businesses, especially, you know, blue collar trades companies. And listen, I'm going to call it what it is. There's a lot of old school type mindset in these industries, right? Old school leadership, old school competition, you know, that kind of stuff in these industries. And I've seen it here. Like, you know, I mean, I still work with my dad. He's got a really old school mindset. We complement each other really, really well, because he's, you know, he brings the old school out of me. I bring the new school out of him, you know. But there, for a long time, there was that same mentality, more so when we were smaller, right? And I've since learned, right? And I like to think that I've learned a couple of things along the way, but the same thing, right, is I can't believe this. You know, that person was here for 2.5 years. We trained them. We put all this money, and now they're just going to quit, you know? And again, God forbid, it's to start their own business, which, you know, has happened a couple times now. And I have come to my senses, and, you know, because even if they didn't leave in an amicable way, like, I don't know, the fact that they still, some of them have reached out a year and a half later saying, how do you do this? You know, how did you get from A to B to C? You know, I could have said, hey, go, you know, fuck off, you know, but I didn't. And, you know, when I helped them, man, the feeling that you get, I mean, it's so rewarding. And that's how I think, you know, you're doing the right thing and you're on the right path. Right. But again, it's so common in these industries. And I implore everyone out there to heed, you know, the advice that Dan just gave is really, you know, listen, everybody's on their own journey. It's not your journey, it's their journey. Right. And whether they work for you or not, it's not your place to tell them what they should or shouldn't do or can or can't do. And, You know, they're going to do what they feel is best for them and their family always. And you can't stand in the way of that. You know, the best thing that you can do is help them.
Mm-hmm.
So
that's good. Yeah. The day of golden handcuffs working on people is no longer here.
Yeah.
I know that we're leading all different generations, right? But when I'm talking about millennials and Gen Zs, which are majority of the workforce nowadays, I mean, options are endless. They can make a living doing anything, anywhere. And if they have a license in their pocket, they're even more valuable. And so a lot of these things that we're talking about is more than just matching your competitors' pay to bring somebody in, right? Because that's one thing we all have in common is that we can pay people good to attract them to our business. But some of these other tangibles we're talking about in leadership and your culture and things like that are things that help to retain those people. Because going back to, well, they're only here for a season. What if you invest in that person, even if they tell you, hey, Josh, I want to start my own business. You say, let me invest in you. Let me help you get to that journey. You know what? If you do that, it actually plays the opposite effect, because I've had many of people who's told me that who still work for my business today, because they actually realize that, wow, starting my own business is really hard. And there's actually a career here in this business. Yeah. You know, the response that that owner or manager gave me when I told them that was the complete opposite of what I thought I was going to get. I actually thought I wasn't going to get fired when I said that. But, you know, so I know that this may seem soft for some people and stuff, and that's okay. You know, like leading older generations, this may be a little different. I grew up in a generation where my dad gave me a shovel and told me to get to work and not back talk. And that's what I did, you know, and I'm on the cusp there. I'm still considered a millennial at my age, you know, but I'm an older generation. I'm older in that generation. But, you know, I understand what it was like to grow up like that. And today, the thing is that you talk to any business owner who has an old school mindset, and the first thing they tell you is nobody wants to work. And, you know, and that's the first, and that's really it. Mm-hmm. These kids nowadays, right? Nobody wants to work. They're all worthless, so on and so forth. So I'm pretty passionate about changing that mindset and helping them realize that just because people are different doesn't mean they're wrong. And I agree with you. There's a lot of lazy people in the world, but you know what? That's every generation. There's lazy people. Exactly. And you know who raised this next generation? Usually you, right? And then other than that, it's just different. So I think once you switch your mindset and realize different is not necessarily bad, then that's when you start to really move your leadership forward and start to move your business or department forward, because you realize that it's not necessarily a bad thing.
Yeah, a couple comments on that. You're absolutely right. You know, and you know, I'm kind of picking up here. You grew up in the same program that I did. I call it the Figure It Out program. That's what my dad said to me a lot. I can't tell you how many times I was in the field. I called him up and said, Dad, how do I rewire this switch? Figure it out. Click. All right. But you know, and I mentioned that because you mentioned the next generations, and I agree with you that, you know, there's lazy people across all generations, and you know, sometimes these up and coming generations get a bad rap, and one of the reasons they get a bad rap is because they learn differently, right? And that's also not a bad thing. There's a whole array of ways that they can learn now. I like to call it just-in-time learning, right? Where they're in front of a piece of equipment or a situation and they YouTube it or they Google it. And they say, oh, okay, this is how I do it, right? I see that with auto mechanics a lot. How do I change a carburetor? Oh, okay, here it is. It's right here. And, you know, so I think that gets a little bit a bad rap instead of taking advantage of it, right? And utilizing these tools and these styles of learning that the newer generations are used to. People kind of shy away from it because I think they're unfamiliar, or it's not how they learned, or, you know, they can't tell somebody to just figure it out anymore, you know? And I got to tell you though, like, yeah, you figured it out and I figured it out, but was it the best way? I don't know. I mean, shit, if I had a video to watch instead, I probably would have got it done in half the time. You know? Oh
man. Yeah. You're telling me.
So on that topic though, leads me to another question is, you know, obviously there's a skills gap, right? And I mean, I wrote a whole book about this, and you know, this is what we talk about a lot on the show. but I'm curious, right? These industries, we're talking about leadership, we're talking about business, we're talking about how great the people are in them. Why don't kids see these blue collar careers as viable? I mean, that's a broad question, right? But I mean, you know, what is it about the industries right now that we need to change in order to attract the next generation? Maybe that's a better question.
Yeah. So the first thing, Josh, is that, you know, people are influenced by what they hear, what they see, and who they surround themselves with. So at the very basic level of influencing the next generation is we need to do a good job about getting in front of them and sharing the message that there is success in the trades. There is opportunity in the trades. And by the way, we do embrace technology, and we do want you to build your career here, and we do want you to grow and learn, because that's what they're wanting, you know, and they're thinking, even if they think that there may be success in the trades, a lot of times their mind automatically goes to like, oh, a bunch of old dudes that don't even know how to use an iPhone, right? Like that may be what they're thinking. But I literally just, you know, I went to Service World this year to walk into that trade show and see like all the technology nowadays at our fingertips, like so many great opportunities to really take advantage of that. That's the kind of message we need to be talking about now. And with, you know, some of the programs out there, like I know Dirty Jobs was leading the way with really showing a lot of the blue collar success, you know, really starting at a school level, starting at a parenting level. I mean, even at my age, I mean, I have 4 kids that I'm raising up, and I'm helping them realize how important the trades are and that there's opportunity there, and that college is not necessarily for everyone. And that is a completely different message than I grew up with. And I'm assuming you grew up with too, because in the 90s, you know, I mean, college was pretty much everything at that point. It was like either you go to college and be successful, or you don't, and you're going to fail in life. And so that's what I want to start with. But really, there's some other key factors that help to attract and retain the next generation. And part of that is the culture, having a good, positive culture and sharing that. The career path for growth, we kind of talked about a little bit. And the third piece is the technology. So the more that we can talk about those things and share those things, especially on platforms where that person is, you know, any social media platform, right? Just depends on who you're looking to attract. The more that we can share that information and show that we're doing these things and make these next generation, these kids feel included, the more that we're going to attract and really turn this whole stigma around to that being a tradesperson is not a success.
Yeah. And that's a collective effort, right? I mean, and thankfully, at least from what I see, and sometimes I'm blinded by the circles I'm in, I think, because, you know, it's a heavy bias, right? I'm in a lot of trade circles and stuff like that. So to me, I'm like, oh, the trades are everywhere. What are you talking about? But, you know, I see it more and more, right? You've got tradespeople on Instagram showing their work. You've got people like you and me, you know, doing podcasts and talking about it. And I'm seeing podcasts now, you know, about the trades pop up everywhere, which I think is wonderful, right? I mean, it's really starting to get this message out there. So, you know, I agree with you. We need to share it. We need to continue to do it. I mean, what do you see in the future for the skilled trades as far as recruiting efforts? Is it all social media? Is it I mean, how you to get in front of these people, you know, but what's the best way to do that? Is it to talk about the money? Is it to not talk about the money? Is it to talk about the culture? You know, I mean, what do we need to say? What do we need to do as business owners and as tradespeople to really, I don't know, put an exclamation point on what it is that we do?
Okay. So when you think back to the world we live in today, we live in a world of convenience. And I think convenient times, this can make soft people, so to say, but I don't know why I'm going there. But in reality, you know, as business owners and as attracting the next generation, we need to make it as convenient as possible for them to get involved into the trade. So removing the barriers of entry will be important in doing that. And that could be anything from the way they apply to your business to, I mean, all other things, how they get trained up, the technology that we're using, how quickly we can get them trained up and operating in a truck or operating in the office or whatever position that it's in. First and foremost, I think it just needs to be convenient, and we need to remove those barriers. But the next thing is kind of repeat that question again, Josh. I kind of got lost there and talking about the convenience. Is it? No. What was that second piece to that question?
Just what do we have to do to get this stuff in front of people? How do we hook them? Right? Is really what the basis of the question. How do we capture their attention and then keep it?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really broad question. I mean, we're doing it right now on this podcast. But what I've realized is, you know, whenever you think about changing a whole mindset of the entire nation, it's pretty overwhelming to think, you know, I'm just Dan from Texas. Like, how can I help that? And so what I want to challenge people out there to do is to get plugged into their local school and go talk to somebody there. And because right now, more than ever, this is trending. Trades are trending. So if you live in America and there's a school near you, more than likely somebody there has been talking about a trades program or building a trades program. And I think more than ever, the kids right now, that they just want to see that, hey, look, here's a person, they do exist. And by the way, they look pretty cool. And there may even be some of their classmates that graduated that are now working for your company that you can get in front of them and really make an impact in your local community, because that'll spread like wildfire. And that's really what I think. So you can do that hands-on in schools. You can do that by joining community efforts. You can do that by sharing on your social media platform. The days of sharing social media where it's, hey, look, here's a picture of a generic tradesman and they're working on an HVAC unit. Like, I don't know, like you really need to show the ins and outs of your business, like the culture, the company events, the trainings, oh yeah, here we're at a job fair today. I'm working with a company who was recently sharing with me that they went to a school trade show and they took some of the kids that had graduated the year before that now worked for them to the trade show. And it made the biggest impact because now they could actually, I remember that so-and-so that was here just last year. And he's saying like, look, this is a great company. I'm getting paid to learn. I'm making more money than I've ever made. And that starts to spread and starts to influence people to come into the trades.
Yeah. There's a lot to be said about that. Right. And when you talk about the trades, it means something different when it comes from somebody close to their age rather than when it comes from me or even from you, It just does. I mean, it needs to be hit from all angles, but man, I've had some 18, 19-year-old, 20-year-olds on the podcast before, and what they say resonates 100 times better with their audience than anything that I could possibly say. It's amazing. So I think you're spot on. I think that's a really great idea, because we're all doing it now. We've got apprentices coming in. We just hired a kid out of trade school just yesterday. We have a nice little training program that goes through the PM department, install department, up to apprentice, and I never really thought about taking those kids, if you will, that just graduated at trade school and then taking them back to the career fair, right? And letting them talk, even though I know this shit. I just, sometimes I need people like you to connect those dots, man. So thanks for that. That's great. And I hope my audience is paying attention too. The other thing that I'll say is you made a comment about impacting local community. Yeah. And I think that's really important with this generation too. And one of the things that I like to point out is that, these up and coming generations, they love to be involved in community. And I hate generalizing, but, I mean, as a collective, they like to be involved in community. They want to change the world, and I tell people the same thing. If you want to have that type of impact on community and civilization and that kind of stuff, why wouldn't you be interested in the industries that actually manufacture it, right? I mean, I think framing has to be mentioned in that conversation too, right? We don't just fix air conditioners, we keep people comfortable, right? We don't pave roads, we connect cities, you know. And yeah, if you want to change the world, help manufacture, you know, civilization. I mean, I think that that could be something that we integrate into all these things that we've been talking about.
That's good. Yeah. And yeah, that's really powerful. I hadn't thought about that, Josh, but even, you know, as plumbers, we protect the health of the nation.
That's right.
You know, right. I mean, exactly. So we are, because yeah, when we think about leading and like leading the next generation, they do want to be a part of something bigger than themselves. And, you know, a couple of things that I think about when it comes to even down to like leading my 7-year-old son, Eli. He says this to me sometimes when like with him particularly, when I commit to doing something as his father and then I uncommit to doing it for no matter what reasons, he feels jaded. He says things like, I can't believe you lied to me. Like, why would you lie to me? Like, why would you commit to that and not follow through?
Talk about breaking your heart, man.
Yeah, it breaks your heart, right? And you're like, son, you know, like I framed my words like this. I didn't truly commit, right? Or you own it, right? And you just apologize for it. But even at that early of an age, kids are feeling like that. And so when you're leading the next generation and let's say you start to apply some of these things that Josh and I are talking about and you have some apprentices working, the two hardest things in leadership is doing what you say you're going to do first, and then doing it consistently. And so if you're having a hard time retaining the next generation, more than likely you may or may not be doing what you say you're going to do, right? And then if you are, you're probably not doing it consistently. They want some kind of consistent message that they can depend on. And as soon as you go off of that and you say like, hey, I have a career path for you, but by the way, I actually have done nothing for you in the last year. Of course, you're not going to retain that person, right? Because words only go so far. So when I'm working with with the business owners I work with now, I talk about, you know, like slow down and remember that we need to be very precise on what it is that we're implementing into our business, because it really helps build our credibility as a leader. I had, going back to my experience and leading in my plumbing business, man, it was heartbreaking at certain points, because I literally at one point, I remember standing in front of my team and saying, you know, here's what we're going to implement this next quarter. It's going to be awesome, right? And then I overheard them talking at the dumpster talk behind the shop, right? The techs are kind of surrounded with their little ringleader, and I hear them talking. They say, just give Dan 2 weeks and he's going to be off this. He's going to forget about it. And I thought, man, I have literally created that monster. I've created that reputation of I enjoy changing things, but I don't stick with it. And greatness in any business, whether it's training your technicians or implementing a new process or serving your clients, all that is done in consistency. And like a lot of times people say, hey, Dan, I want you to come in and do sales training for my technicians. And I always laugh because it's just a splash in the bucket. Like you bring some sales guy in there and he flashes and he gets all these fancy things going on, and you see a little spike in your revenue, and then it's back to normal again about two weeks later. And you wonder, why is this not sticking? It's because there's no consistent system in your business. And I tell people that once you establish a system of how you're going to train your team, you need 52 weeks of consistent training to make a great team, you know? And so give it a year of really getting better at your message and better at training and doing those things. And that's going to build greatness. So, but bringing it back to where I started, yeah, the next generation, they want to know that there is an opportunity for growth, and they also want to know that you're going to follow through with what you say you're going to do.
Yeah, no, that's really good insight, and man, a lot of what you're saying is resonating, man. I'm telling you, because it's difficult to navigate, right? And sometimes you need people to remind you that, yeah, that's a real thing, that consistency. And I'm glad you brought that up, because, you know, my followers and my listeners know that I preach all the time. You know, people say that there's no secret to success, and I beg to differ. And I think that secret is consistency. I mean, I believe that in every aspect of life, personally, professionally, spiritually, whatever. It's consistency, that really invokes change.
Yeah. I mean, if you think about it, when you think about consistency, if you buy your first house and you consistently maintain it, it's going to give you a lot larger ROI than if you buy your first house and do nothing with it till you sell it.
That's right.
So if you think about that same analogy and you apply it to your spiritual life, to your health, to your fitness, to your business, to your leadership, like that's why I say leadership's a lifetime journey. Every day I have to wake up to be better. You know what? Some days I wake up and I'm not that good, but some days I wake up and I'm great. And all I got to do is just challenge myself every day to be like, all right, I need to learn from this day before, and I need to be one step better than I was the previous day. So one thing I like, one of my routines I like doing, which this helps me because I go back to my story, like naturally I'm a very selfish person. I'm not happy about that, right? Like I'm not bragging, but I have to continually work on serving people. So when I wake up, I do a little journaling exercise and I ask myself, what did I love? What did I learn? And how did I serve? Those three questions every day. I reflect on the day before. And what I realize is that what I love is usually relational things, right? It's time with my kids or interaction on a podcast or with a client or a friend. What did I learn? Usually it could be anything, right? But it's good or bad. But really the how did I serve piece was the piece that if I put not available on there, I'm like, wow, I'm really slipping back into my old trends, especially if I do it day in and day out. And I start, so once I fill that out, Josh, then I close that chapter. I close that day before and I say, look, that was the day before. I can't change any of this. Now I'm going to get focused on today and really know what's important in my life. And I find that doing that consistently really helps keep me on that course to what's truly important and to serving other people. So just wanted to share that as a little tip for the audience.
That's really great. I like that a lot. I journal in the morning too, and I really like, it's very stoic. What did I love? What do I love? What did I learn? And how did I serve? And I think I'm going to try using that structure because, I've tried different things and ultimately I landed on, listen, I just kind of blurb, the day before and what went well and what didn't go well. But I want to get back to more of a structure, and I really, really like this one. So I'm going to give that a shot. I like the premise of that. What did I learn? Okay. All right. Got that one. But really, really good stuff there, Dan. I know we're running short on time, and I could talk to you for hours, but I want to ask one more question before we move to close. Before I ask that question, is there anything else that you wanted to talk about or share, anything like that before we wrap it up?
Yeah, really, Josh, it's just, I just want to be real with the audience and help. And I want them to realize that though I'm here talking on a podcast and I have over 22 years experience in the trades and what I'm doing, I still wake up every day knowing that I have more to learn. And there was a certain point in my life going back that I would show up and I would think nobody has anything to teach me. I already know these things. And so I just want to keep encouraging people out there that you never want to get to that point in your life, because once you get to that point in your life, you stop growing and you become stagnant, and you're either moving forward or you're moving backwards. There's no standing still in life. And so I just want to be real with the audience and let them know that, hey, I'm teaching and I'm sharing this information and things that I've learned, but I'm still right in it with you. Like I'm still learning. I'm still growing my own business, right? I'm still leading my own team. I still make mistakes, and people want a leader who's real, not a leader who's always right. And especially the next generation, they want a leader who's willing to say, you know what? I really messed this one up and I apologize. I own it.
That's right.
Versus pointing the finger elsewhere and saying it's so-and-so's fault. Nobody wants to work with a leader or for a leader like that. And so that's really it. I just want everybody to realize that we're all on this journey together of life, and we're all working to be better. And if you're listening to this podcast, congratulations to you, because you're showing yourself and your team and your family that you're willing to do what it takes to grow. And when it comes to leading people, and helping people understand how to buy into whatever it is that you're sharing or your company systems and goals and things. The simpler it is, the better it is. Like, people try to overcomplicate things too much. And if we can keep it simple, then people can actually buy into it and follow it. Just think about technicians, right? What do we love? Pictures, big, large print, minimum words. Yeah. I mean, like, push the button here. It's the highlighted button. I mean, I'm serious. That's why we're technicians, right? That's why we like working with our hands. It's not that we're dumb. It's just that that's the way our minds work.
Yeah.
And so, okay, I'm done rambling on, but you asked, so I figured I'd share.
I love it, man. I agree 100%. You know, less is more. I follow that model any way that I can, you know, and you know, it's humble, you know. I mean, what you just said is it's very humbling. You know, you said at the very beginning of this podcast, people can only teach you as much as they know. And, you know, so saying that, I think, is it's just reiterating, you know, how much you actually believe that. And the key is, you know, pushing yourself to know more, right? And learn more and never stop, you know, because the more you learn, the more you can give back, if you will. So anyway, I'm going to ask my last question to you. It's something I love to ask everybody on the show. So, you know, I talk a lot about how being in the trades can help you succeed and push you towards success, you know, and I like to say that everybody has their own definition of what success is. You know, to our earlier conversation, a lot of times the education system tries to fit us all in this neat little box, right? Of success looks like, you know, get good grades, go to college, get a good job, get the house with the picket fence, the wife, the 2.5 kids, you know, and hey, this is what success looks like. It ain't the same for everybody, right? So, so I like to ask everybody on the show, what is your definition overall? What's your definition of success, Dan? And how have the skilled trades or your trade helped you to achieve that?
That's a really good question. Really good question. So when I was going through my life transition, one exercise that I had done, and I think it's in the 7 Habits of Highly Successful People, was that eulogy exercise. And where you close your eyes and you imagine that you're at your funeral and somebody's talking about you, somebody that you love is up there talking about you. And what are they saying about you? Write that down. And I wrote that down, and I realized that at the end of the day, I want, when people are talking about me behind my, like, where I'm not anywhere in existence, I want to know that I did the right thing by the people that I was around. So for me, success is not necessarily about how much money I've made. Success is about doing the right thing by people. And success for me is having a wife that I can grow old with, that still loves me, that I've put effort into. I have kids that I've raised that are good, just good people in society. They work hard, and they really give back. And so that's really success for me. I shared earlier in the podcast that I have the pleasure of mentoring and even working for people who used to work for me. You know, that would have never happened if I was just a selfish jerk. You know, I would never have the pleasure of continuing on what I would call my legacy. And so, yeah, that's really it. My dad taught me this. He would say, "Hey, Dan, you know, I know you're running the business nowadays, but just so you know, I want to be able to go to my grandkids' ball games and sit next to my customer and not be ashamed to do so." And that was just kind of like, you're right, Dad. Like, yeah, I want the same thing. I want to know that whether I'm charging, you know, $200 an hour or $700 an hour, I know my prices. I know what I'm charging is fair for staying in business and for offering the quality of service I need to offer. And I know that I'm offering things that are truly needed or wanted by my clients. It's things I'm not just pushing on them because I want to make another dollar in the trades. So that's my story. I'm sticking to it. But really, it's just a good name is better than great riches for me.
I like that. Good name is better than great riches. Awesome. Dan, where can people find you?
Yeah, so people can find me at builtforthetrades.com. I have the podcast, the Built for the Trades podcast, but we also have a lot of great resources there. What makes us different is we're very much leadership focused. We believe that, hey, in order to grow a great business, you have to grow great leaders. and that leader's including yourself, but also the team around you. And so if that's you and you're excited about that, just come be a part of the community. We send out a great little weekly recap email of all of our content we put out. And we're very much focused on just adding value to the trades community, adding value to our the people out there. So that's it. I'll stop rambling again.
Awesome. Dan, man, I can't thank you enough for coming on the show and sharing all that that valuable insight with our listeners. And I think they're going to get a ton of great value out of this this episode. So thanks again for joining us today, man.
Thank you, Josh.